All right, boys and girls, we're starting with chapter 42 today, titled Foreboding. Now, that's a very important word. And if we were in class together, we'd have a discussion about it, but I'll just let you hear the word and think about it for a little bit, and then at the end of the read aloud, we'll talk about it. Her father pulled the car into the driveway and cut the engine. The windshield wipers let out a surprised squeak and then froze in mid-wave. The rain slowed to a trickle. The sun came out from behind a cloud and then disappeared again, and the smell of ketchup melded with butterscotch rose with a gentle persistence from the seats of the car. "Here we are," said her father. "Yep," said Flora, "here we are." 412 Belgrade Avenue. It was the house that Flora had lived in for the whole of her life. But something was different about it. Something had changed. What was it? Ulysses crawled up onto her shoulder. She put her hand on him. The house looked sneaky somehow, almost as if it were up to no good. Foreboding. That was the word that popped up in Flora's head. The house seemed full of foreboding. Do inanimate objects like couches, chairs, spatulas absorb the energy of the criminals, of the wrongdoers among whom they live? The criminal element had queried in a recent issue. It is, of course, entirely unscientific to assume such a thing, but still, we are forced to admit that in this woeful world, there exist objects with an almost palpable energy of menace, spatulas that seem cursed, couches that contain literal and metaphorical stains of the past. So literal and non-literal. Houses that seem to groan and moan for the sins contained in their environment. Can we explain this? No. Do we understand this? We do not. Do we know that criminals exist? We do. We are all so terribly and unfortunately certain that the criminal element will be forever among us. And the arch-nemesis, thought Flora, the arch-nemesis will be forever among us too. Ulysses' arch-nemesis is in that house right now. "Do you remember the darkness of 10,000 hands?" Flora said to her father. "Yep," said her father. "He wields 10,000 hands of anger, greed, and revenge. He is the sworn enemy of Incandesto." "He's Incandesto's arch-nemesis," said Flora. "Right," said her father. "I'll tell you what. The darkness of 10,000 hands better stay away from our squirrel." He honked the horn. "Home the warrior," he shouted. "Home the cat-conquering superhero squirrel." Ulysses puffed out his chest. "Let's go," Flora said. "We have to do it. We have to face the arch-nemesis." "Right," said her father. "Bravely forward." And he honked the horn again. So now that we're at the end of that chapter, Flora said that she felt a sense of foreboding about the house. And then she went into remembering an issue of the criminal element that talked about some places and some objects just giving off a bad feeling because they were related to evildoers. So you can tell from these context clues whether a sense of foreboding is something good or something bad. So think about that. Chapter 43. Treacle. They walked into the house, and the little shepherdess was waiting for them. She was standing where she always stood, the lamb at her feet, the tiny globe above her head, and a look on her face that said, "I know something you don't know." Flora's father took off his hat and bowed to the lamp. "George Buckman," he said. "How do you do?" "Hello?" Flora shouted into the silence of the house. From the kitchen came the sound of laughter. "Mom?" said Flora. No one answered. Flora's sense of foreboding deepened, expanded. And then her mother spoke. She said, "That's absolutely right, William." William? William? There was only one William that Flora knew. What would he be doing in the kitchen with a known arch-nemesis? And then there came the familiar rattle of typewriter keys being struck, the thwack of the carriage being hit. Ulysses' grip on her shoulder tightened. He let out a small chirp of excitement. Her mother laughed again. The laughter was followed by the truly terrifying words. "Thank you so much, William." "Shh," said Flora to her father, who was standing listening with his hat in his hands and a big goofy smile on his face. There was a small round drop of blood on his ear bandage. It looked oddly festive. "You stay here," Flora said to him. "Ulysses and I will go and check this out." Right," said her father. "You bet. I'll stay here." He put his hat on his head and nodded. Flora, superhero on her shoulder, walked quietly, stealthily through the living room and into the dining room and stood before the closed kitchen door. She held herself very still. She made herself into a giant ear. She was getting extremely good at making herself into a giant ear. Flora listened, and she could feel Ulysses, his body tense and expectant, listening too. Her mother spoke. She said, "Yes, it will go like this. Frederico, I have dreamed of you for eons." "No," said another voice, high, thin, extremely annoying. "I've dreamed of you for all eternity." "Ooh," said Flora's mother, "for all eternity. That's good, more poetic." Ulysses shifted his position on Flora's shoulder, and he nodded. "Yes, exactly," said William Spiver. "More poetic. Eons sounds too geological. There's nothing romantic about geology, I assure you." Okay, said Flora's mother. "Right. Oh, what's next, William?" "Well, let me see," said William Spiver. Oh, wait, I skipped something. "What's next, William?" "Actually," said William Spiver, "if you don't mind, I prefer to be called William Spiver." "Of course," said Flora's mother. "I'm sorry. What's next, William Spiver?" "Well, let's see," said William Spiver. "I suppose Frederico would say, 'And I have dreamed of you, Angelique, my darling. I must tell you they were dreams so vivid and beautiful that I don't want to wake to reality.'" "Oh, that's good. Hold on a sec." The typewriter keys came clacking to life, and the carriage return dinged. "Do you think that's good?" Flora whispered to Ulysses. "Do you think that's good writing?" Ulysses shook his head. His whiskers brushed against her cheek. "I don't think so either," Flora said. Actually, she thought it was terrible. It was sickly sweet nonsense. There's a word for that. What was it? Treacle. That was it. So whenever something is just like obnoxiously cute or sweet, it's treacle. Having located the correct word, Flora felt a sudden need to say the word aloud, and so she did. She pushed open the kitchen door and stepped forward. "Treacle!" she shouted. "Flora," said her mother. "Treacle?" said William Spiver. "Yes," said Flora. She was pleased that the one simple word had answered two very important questions. Yes, she was Flora, and yes, it was treacle. Chapter 44. Her Treacherous Heart. William Spiver was wearing dark glasses. There was a pitzer pop in his mouth. He was smiling. He looked exactly like a villain. That's what Flora's brain thought. But her heart, her treacherous heart, rose up joyfully inside of her at the sight of him. Flora's heart was actually glad to see William Spiver. There was just so much she wanted to talk to him about. Pascal's wager, Dr. Measham, the other Dr. Measham, giant squids, giant donuts, and who might be dunking them. If he'd ever heard of a place called Blundermeakin, if he'd ever sat on a horsehair sofa. But William Spiver was sitting beside Ulysses' arch-nemesis, smiling. Obviously, he could not be trusted. "Flora Bell?" said William Spiver. "It's me," said Flora. "I'm surprised you don't smell me, William Spiver, since you can smell everything." "I've never claimed to be able to smell everything. However, it's true that right now I smell squirrel. And there is another odor, something sweet. Something like school lunchrooms on rainy Thursdays. What is it? Oh, it's jelly. Yes, grape jelly. I smell a squirrel and grape jelly." "Squirrel?" said Flora's mother. She turned away from the typewriter. She looked at Flora. "Squirrel," she said. "What in the world are you doing back here with that squirrel? I told your father this malfeasance must be stopped." said Flora. Her mother, hands still over the keys of her typewriter, stared at Flora with her mouth open. William Spiver, for once, was silent. On Flora's shoulder, the squirrel trembled. Flora slowly raised her left arm. She pointed at her mother. She said, "What did you tell my father to do with that squirrel?" Her mother cleared her throat. "I told your father," but the sentence remained unfinished, the truth unuttered, because the kitchen door suddenly swung open to reveal Flora's father. "George Buckman," he said to the room. "How do you do?" He walked into the kitchen and stood beside Flora. "George, what in the world?" "Oh, where was I? Oh, yeah," said Flora's mother. "You look like you've been in a battle." "I'm fine. Just fine. I was saved by the squirrel." "What?" said Flora's mother. "I was attacked by Mr. Klaus. He landed on my head, and, "Well, that's fascinating," said William Spiver, "but may I interrupt for a moment?" "Absolutely." "Who is Mr. Klaus?" "Mr. Klaus is a landlord, and also a cat. A large cat. Usually he attacks my ankles. This time it was my head. It was a surprising attack. I was not prepared." "And?" said William Spiver. Oh, yes. And Mr. Klaus bit my ear, and there was a lot of pain, and the squirrel rescued me." "Have you lost your mind?" said Flora's mother. "I don't think so," said Flora's father, smiling hopefully. "Can't you handle the smallest task? I asked you to take care of the squirrel situation." Flora felt a wave of anger roll through her. "Quit speaking euphemistically," she said. "Quit calling it the squirrel situation." So euphemistically is kind of like not literally. So speaking in expressions instead of just saying exactly what you mean. "You asked my father to kill. You asked him to murder my squirrel." Ulysses let out a chirp of excitement, and the kitchen became as silent as a tomb. Chapter 45. 4 words. "It's the truth," Flora said. "You told Pop to kill Ulysses." Having denounced her mother, Flora now turned her attention to William Spiver and his betrayal. "What are you even doing here, William Spiver? Why are you in the kitchen with my mother?" "He was assisting me with my novel." William Spiver blushed a bright and otherworldly red. "I am delighted that you find me of some assistance, Miss Buckman," he said. He took the pitcher pop out of his mouth and bowed in the direction of Flora's mother. "I must admit, I've always had a certain facility with words, and I'm terribly fond of the novel form, though my interests lie in the area less of romance and more of the speculative nature of things. Science fiction, if you will. Fact and fantasy blended, an extended meditation on the nature of the universe, quarks, dwarf stars, black holes, things like that. Did you know, for instance, that the universe is expanding even as we speak?" Only Ulysses responded to this question. The squirrel shook his head vigorously, obviously amazed. William Spiver pushed his dark glasses up higher on his nose. He took a deep breath. "Speaking of expansion, did you know that there are now something like 90 billion galaxies in the universe? In such a universe, it seems ridiculous and foolhardy to attempt creation of one's own, but still, I persevere." "You still didn't answer my question, William Spiver," said Flora. "Well, let me try again." "No," said Flora, "you're a traitor, and you," she wheeled and pointed at her mother, "are an arch-nemesis, a true villain." Flora's mother crossed her arms. "I am someone who wants the best for you. If that makes me an arch-nemesis, or a villain, fine." Flora took a deep breath. "I'm moving in with Pop," she said. "What?" said her mother. "Really?" said her father. "Your father," said her mother, "doesn't know how to take care of himself, much less someone else." "At least he doesn't wish he had a lamp for a daughter," said Flora. "I feel like I'm missing something," said William Spiver. "I want to live with Pop," said Flora. "Really?" her father said again. "Go right ahead," said her mother. "It would certainly make my life easier." Make my life easier? Those 4 words, so small, so simple, so ordinary, came flying at Flora like enormous slabs of stone. She actually felt herself tip sideways as they hit her. She put up a hand and held on to Ulysses. She used the squirrel to steady herself. "Do not hope," she whispered, but she wasn't sure what it was that she wasn't hoping for. All she knew was that she was a cynic, but her heart hurt. Cynics' hearts weren't supposed to hurt. William Spiver pushed back his chair and stood. "Miss Buckman," he said, "perhaps you'd like to retract those last words? They seemed unnecessarily harsh." Flora's mother said nothing. William Spiver remained standing. "Okay then," he said, "I'll speak. I'll attempt once again to make myself clear." He paused. "The only reason I'm here, Florabelle, is that I came looking for you. You were gone a long time. I missed you, and I wondered if you had returned. So I came to find you." Flora closed her eyes. She saw nothing but darkness, and into the darkness slowly swam the other Dr. Measham's giant squid, moving sadly along, flailing its 8 lonely, enormous arms. "I came to find you." What was it with William Spiver and the words he said to her? Why did they make her heart squinch up? "Seal blubber," said Flora. "I beg your pardon?" said William Spiver. Ulysses gently pushed against Flora's head, and then the squirrel leapt away from her. "Oh no," said Flora's mother. "No, not that. No, no." Ulysses flew over Phyllis Buckman's head. He went high and higher still. "Yes," said Flora. "Yes." All right. And the last chapter for today. Let's see. Actually, I'm going to read one more. But in between the one I'm reading now and this last one is a picture chapter, chapter 46. So take a break, pause, go read chapter 46, go look at the picture, it's just one page, and then come back to chapter 47, and then we'll be done. Chapter 47, Flying Squirrels. Why, Flora wondered, did everything become silent when Ulysses flew? It had been the same in the giant donut, at least until everyone started screaming. It was as if some small bit of peace descended. The world became dreamy, beautiful, and slow. Flora looked around her. She smiled. The sun was shining into the kitchen, illuminating everything. Ulysses' whiskers, the typewriter keys, her father's upturned, smiling face, and her mother's astonished and disbelieving one. Even William Spiver was illuminated, his white hair glowing like a wild halo. "Well, what is it?" said William Spiver. "What's going on?" Flora's father laughed. "Don't you see, Phyllis? Do you? Anything can happen." Ulysses floated above them. He zoomed down to the ground and then went shooting back up to the ceiling. He looked behind him and performed a lazy mid-air back flip. "For the love of Pete," said Flora's mother in a strange and wooden voice. "Someone tell me something," said William Spiver. Ulysses dived down again. He flew past William Spiver's right ear. "Ah!" said William Spiver. "Well, what was that?" "The squirrel," said Flora's mother in a strange new voice. "He's flying." She stood up suddenly. Right," she said. "Okay, I have to go upstairs and take a nap." Which was an odd thing for her to say, because Flora's mother was not in any way a napper. In fact, she was an anti-napper. She didn't believe in naps at all. She often said they were a big fat waste of time. "Yes, a little nap. That's what I need." Flora's mother walked out of the kitchen and closed the door behind her. Ulysses landed on the table next to the typewriter. "Well, it's not that shocking," said William Spiver. "There are flying squirrels, you know. They exist. In fact, there are some theories that all squirrels are descended from a flying squirrel. In any case, flying squirrels themselves are a documented fact." Ulysses looked at William Spiver and then over at Flora. He reached out a paw and hit a key on the typewriter. The single clack echoed through the kitchen. "How about flying squirrels who type?" said Flora. not as well documented, admitted William Spiver. Excuse me. Ulysses hit another key, and then another. Holy bagumba, said Flora's father. He flies, he vanquishes cats, and he types. He's a superhero, said Flora. It's amazing, said her father. It's wonderful. But I think I'd better go have a quick word with your mother about the whole situation. All right. We'll continue on Monday. This was a rough read aloud. These chapters always are a little bit tough for me because Flora's mom says something to her that is so harsh. And it makes me think of times when I've said something that I regret. You know, I get really mad and I say something and then I immediately think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that. I think that it's hard to hear from someone else because it makes you think, like, man, what if we all just took a little more time to think about what we're saying? But anyway, I hope you liked these chapters. We'll continue on Monday, and we're going to have to work real hard to finish, but we will do it. All right.